The guys, PC Guy here with the news in tech and gaming for the week, our usual weekly roundup of the stuff that's going on in those industries, and this week the focus is definitely on the Xbox that has just been announced. Still slightly with the flu and a bit of a stuffy nose, so apologies for any weird breathing noises that you might hear, but can't really quite help it, right? In any case, we had been hearing a lot of rumors and leaks about the upcoming PS5 that's supposedly going to be launching in December next year, and now we have a full-on reveal slash announcement of the Xbox Series X, also aimed to be available around holiday 2020, so and around the same time frame as the PS5 is supposed to be launching, which is to be expected. Features a weird tower-like design, a bit more vertical, which is kind of strange since consoles usually are horizontal. People have them in their cabinets and the TVs in that position, and a lot of furniture has room for that. I'm not quite sure where people are going to be placing this, but on to more important topics, the things that we actually know about the Xbox Series X. It will also unveiled at the same announcement Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, which is a new chapter, like it says here in the Hellblade story. And well, as far as actual specs go, we don't really have a lot to go on, but we did have other leaks that were in the meantime kind of rumored. CriticalHit.net made a nice little roundup of the announcement for those that don't have a patience to read through the whole thing, and they are claiming, these are the official claims from Microsoft, mind you, it will support 4K at 60 FPS, with 120 FPS being a possibility. Now, clearly not at 4K. Even the 4K at 6 FPS, I find it difficult to believe, but let's roll with it for now before I comment on that. It will support variable refresh rate and 8K visuals. VRR, I do believe that 8K, yeah, let's put a little damper on that. 4 times as powerful as the Xbox One X. Auto latency, dynamic latency input, XSD, much like the PS5, to make load times lower. And well, as far as important hardware specs, that's pretty much it that we can see. A good note that I should mention is the backwards compatibility with all other Xboxes up to date. Those were the official announcements. What about actual leaks that we have been hearing about more specific details like the actual specs of the console? It's supposed to be having an 8-core CPU, 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 RAM, as well as an SSD, much like the PS5 will, and GPU that is supposed to be ticking in at 12 teraflops of performance. There's also a mention of having two consoles released with different specs. One will be codenamed Anaconda right now, probably not the final name, mind you. Two of the most well developed of the two, also more expensive, and will obviously perform better. And the Lockhart, which will be a slightly less powerful console for those on more of a bit of a budget. Now, the Lockhart apparently seems to be targeting 1440p at 60 FPS, and this is a cheaper console, mind you. Now, there's a few questions about whether this is actually feasible or not. Let's be a little bit realistic here for a second. Most of you guys that are watching this channel are probably more on the PC enthusiast segment, so you probably have built PCs or game on your PCs, and 1440p, 144 FPS at decently high settings, you guys know how much that will cost you to build a PC that supports that. Now tell me, on a console that is probably going to be selling around the 400 to 500 or 550 price point, do you guys really think that for that price you're going to get a machine that will run 1440p, 144 FPS, and that's the cheaper version, so probably around the 400 mark or 350, I'm guessing? Probably not. Yeah, depends on that you're playing, obviously, and the quality settings. If they're going to tune down the graphics, then yeah, perhaps. Other options right now, and I'll actually go to that in a second in another new segment afterwards, is a bit of, let's say, FPS trickery to make that happen. But like I said, I'll cover that in the following news article after this. And then you have the claims of 4K at 60 FPS and possible 8K support. It's not going to happen. Again, if you tune down the settings, you might get that in very select titles. In anything that looks graphically a little bit better, it's just not going to happen right now. 4K technology is not that easy to run. If you guys have a PC running at 4K 60 FPS on games that are a bit more graphically demanding, you'd know that you need something like a 2080 Super, 2080 Ti to run at reasonable FPS at 4K. So expecting that on a $500 or even if it's 550 console, it's just not going to happen. The TI alone, the graphics card alone costs more than the whole console would cost to buy, and that's not even considering all the other components needed. So let's put a damper on that. I actually have a guy at work that was saying that he was going to get an 8K TV to match with his PS5, and that it was not going to be running at low frame rate. And yeah, I mean, what do you even say to that if people are that much on the faint boy territory? Anyway, next news piece. Every year, AMD releases kind of a global overhaul of their drivers with a bit of the major features rolled up in one big package, and this time it's called AMD Adrenalin 2020 driver release or driver update, whatever you want to call it. And they do have a feature that kind of ties back to the Xbox scenario because it is AMD powered in terms of the hardware solutions for GPU and CPU. So this feature might kind of explain how they plan to achieve the refresh rates that they are advertising. It's called AMD Radeon Boost, and it's supposed to turbocharge your game by giving you performance increases. They give a few titles examples here, up to 10% in Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is a bit of a more demanding game, all the way up to 38% in Overwatch from what they say. And they don't really specify how this happens. It says it dynamically boosts the resolution of the entire frame to allow for high FPS with little perceived impact to quality. There has actually been some testing done. Hardware Unbox, I believe, did a video testing the performance and how it actually looked when you were playing and how much of an FPS increase it would give you. And the results that they find that while it does work, it's a bit disappointing in some ways. Now, before that, what does it actually do? It does when you are having very active, hectic scenes, like for example shooters that you're running around, camera flying everywhere, it drops your resolution down without necessarily you noticing from, let's say, 1440p to 1080p, or even further down to 720 or something. So this is intended as a way to improve your frame rate, give you a smoother experience, and you won't notice it much because your camera is moving, you're focusing on the action, and you don't notice the difference in resolution and image quality. This is partially true. It is noticeable in things like if you're playing a shooter and there's a static object, like for example the weapon you're holding, you usually see at least the end bit of it. That part is static, it's not moving around like the rest of the images, and it's noticeable in some cases that the image quality drops when the frame boost thingy is doing its magic. So in that aspect, it is not amazing. It is also very noticeable, for example, if you're playing at 4K and the boost is downsampling it down to 1440 or 1080 to improve your performance, you will not notice as much of a difference because 1080p is still decent quality, 1440p is still good quality. However, if you're playing on 1080p and it is dropping you to 720, or if you're playing at 1440 and it drops you to 720, then you notice a huge impact on the image quality. And well, yeah, it does deliver a decent amount of FPS increase, but the experience kind of suffers a bit from it. At any rate, this might be something that they could be aiming to use on the Xbox or possibly as well on the PlayStation to actually boost the frame rate and get all those 144 Hz that they're claiming at higher resolutions with the hardware that they have available. So it might be something there. I have not seen anyone mention it. It's just something that got me thinking when I was reading these news. Speaking of AMD, the Ryzen 3950X is being sold on SiliconLottery as we know pre-binned at certain overclock points, and obviously it is already sold out because these things sell like hotcakes, but you can see the price range differences on it from a baseline 4 GHz boxed version. Well, I'm assuming this is an all-core. Has to be all-core naturally, to all the way to a 4.15 GHz all-core at 1500, which is basically double the price of the CPU on retail, but then again, you get guaranteed performance at this, well, clock speed. Some statistics have also been published, compiled by a user on Reddit and published then by Tom's Hardware, that shows that 56% of the 3950Xs are hitting the 4.1 GHz mark, while only 19 are hitting the 4.15. So this seems to be kind of the break-off point where you kind of really need the golden sample to hit the 415, while the majority will still be able to hit 410, and while virtually everything will hit 4.05. At the IEDM conference keynote, Intel has released their manufacturing roadmap from 2019, so from the present all the way to 2019. Obviously, very early planning on such a long term, but so yeah, it could be subject to a lot of changes depending on how things evolve, how the technology evolves, and how good they actually do if they hit any unexpected roadblocks like they have been with their 10 nanometer process. But at least we have some idea of what they are aiming for at least. You can find the story on multiple online sources, like in this case an Indie Tech, and there are a few slides that have been shown to the public, like for example this one. But the more interesting one is, in my opinion at least, this one here with the roadmap in terms of nodes, and they seem to be wanting to go back to their earlier tick-tock cadence of releases with a node shrink optimization, and going like that instead of the 40 nanometer plus that we are having now for I don't even know how many years anymore. Anyway, they're advertising the 10 nanometer process is 2019. They surely mean the mobile parts because we have no desktop 10 nanometer parts yet. I'm assuming next year you will be able to see them with 7 nanometer in 2021, followed by a plus, 5 nanometer 2023, 24, 5 nanometer plus, and so on and so forth to 3 nanometer in 2025, 2 nanometer in 27, and 1.4 nanometers in 29. I'm curious how difficult the development will be when you start shrinking more and more and more, considering there are issues here, and the lower you go, the more difficult it will be, not just because of engineering and technical issues, but also the general laws of physics make it more and more difficult to make things work reliably the smaller you make them, especially on that scale. Keep in mind that when they say that it's going to be available on year this many, it does not necessarily mean you'll be seeing it on the shelves for desktop products in that year. They could be meaning mobile chips, they could mean like laptop chips, for example, server chips first, for example. So it does not mean that you'll get the products on your desktop in that year, or it's probably going to be the year after. Like now they're saying that the 10 nanometer is available 2019, when it will only possibly be 2020. So yeah, it's going to be not necessarily strictly following that map. And obviously, it will depend how development goes and what kind of roadblocks they hit in their attempts to match that roadmap. Depending on their success or not, AMD might stay ahead. As you know, AMD is on 7 nanometer right now, and they have 5 nanometer planned for, I believe, 2021 most likely, with Zen 4. Zen 3 is still going to be 7, but Zen 4 is probably going to be 5 nanometer, and it should probably launch in the year after next one. So yeah, TSMC's 5 nanometer node is doing pretty well from what we hear, with nice yields. So it's looking nice for that to reach 5 nanometer on that year, where Intel will most likely still be on the 7 nanometer node then. And let's hope that while they're shrinking the node, Intel actually improves their silicon a little bit on the architecture level, because a new vulnerability has just been found to add to the 1500 other vulnerabilities that Intel chip seems to have. It's called Plundervolt, and it operates by undervolting your CPU, and while in that undervolted state, it kind of neglects to do some of the encryption that it usually does to keep the data being handled safe from, prying eyes, let's say. Apparently there is a microcode fix, or at least mitigation for it. But however, it does mess with overclocking utilities, as you can see here in the report from, I believe, Tom's Hardware, that software-based overclocking utilities might be affected by this mitigation, because, well, undervolting is what this vulnerability does, and that's something that usually is handled via overclocking applications. So they're limiting anything that can access that sort of commands to hardware based. Now on the closing notes with a few interesting tidbits, Alphacool has unveiled their AIO cooler for graphics cards. It is an interesting concept that I kind of wish was around earlier already, and a bit more of more variety, more vendors approaching this AIO approach for graphics cards as opposed to just CPUs. The Eiswolf Aurora seems like a nice option to keep your GPU cool. AIOs for the CPU have gotten cheaper and cheaper throughout the years, and they provide a good introductory step for water cooling on your CPU, a bit of an in-between between the normal air cooling and the super expensive custom loops that probably cost 500 upwards to cool your system in that way, between radiators and tubing and fittings and water blocks and whatnot. So it is a good alternative to have, like we do now, CPU water coolers, AIOs for 100 something dollars. In terms of the GPU, it's going to be working on the same idea, closed loop, etc., etc. No mention of the price just now, and it should be further details at CES 2020. But it is using an approach that lets you, if you would like to, it's not like it's a closed loop, but you can undo the fittings, let's say, and kind of add it to a custom loop if you choose to so expand it in the future. Definitely something I'd like to see more of, and I do love the flexibility that gives you to expand in the future. So let's hope that the idea catches on. In a bit of international news, the Chinese government is planning to ban or replace foreign hardware in the country within the next 3 years, at least as far as public and official institutions go. Private companies, obviously, there is no mention of that, but in any case, in official government agencies, they are going to be phasing out all hardware in the next couple of years, which is kind of a blow for a few companies like, for example, Dell, HP, etc., that sell a lot of hardware. And well, yeah, this is mostly fueled by fears of spying, that hardware manufacturers might include any sort of backdoors in the systems that lets them look into the Chinese government's issues and secrets. But in any case, whether that's paranoia or justified, not something I'm going to comment about, but it is a massive endeavor, and it will certainly have some ramifications for the Intel manufacturers that are holding the market right now. To end this news report in a bit of a lighter note, Bell of Lost Souls, a famous RPG, let's call it tabletop RPG focused website, has posted an interesting story about an AI that's being developed to play the role of Dungeon Master. If you are familiar with tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of stuff, Dungeon Master is basically the person that is running the adventure, developing it along, and guiding the way, kind of how the players react to the environment, what is going to happen, that sort of thing. So having an AI in that spot is kind of an interesting development of technology, and it does open the doors for some interesting possibilities and some pretty crazy scenarios, as long as it is developed properly and actually does its job, obviously. Apparently it's capable of creating its custom monsters and spells, as well as character backstories and names and things like that. So yeah, I would definitely want to see how this actually works when it's fully functional and doing its job. It might be something quite interesting to play, and might also open the way for more interesting RPGs, not just tabletops and Dungeons and Dragons style, but actually RPGs, full-on computer games that are developed and run by AIs in terms of story development. It does open a lot of doors and gives the developers a bit more power to expand their worlds of basically infinite content if it works properly. This has been it for the week. This has been Attic PC Guy. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video and it helped you guys catch up on what has happened. Give us a like and a comment if you would like to help the channel, the video rank up a little bit. And if you have some suggestions, tell us what you like, tell us what you think needs improvement. Always open to hear that. Check out our other videos and consider subscribing to the channel. That's going to help us grow basically and be able to provide more videos, better content for you guys. So yeah, that would definitely be appreciated. Hope I'll see you guys in the next video. Have fun, and until then.